We knew that the race was going to be very close, closer than any of us anticipated.
5 days before the election, Michael Hooley, who's the founding partner of the firm I work in, called me and said, those other states aren't doing so well. Now you actually have to win Florida.
I had said in May at a meeting at the DNC that it was going to be as close as 1960, and we were going to have a long night. So on Election Day, when we saw our first exit poll numbers, we knew we were on the knife's edge at 270 electoral votes.
We spent the last 3 days not sleeping.
Bush was taking days off in the last 2 months, and this guy was working every day, every hour.
Al Gore actually had passion, runs counter to conventional wisdom.
Like most people in a campaign, I hadn't slept in several days myself.
We always believed that if we won Michigan and Pennsylvania and Florida, the trifecta, that we would win the presidency.
We started to hit our states and where we were winning, New York, Pennsylvania, which was a great surprise for us, Michigan, and early on they called Florida for us, and I said, man, we're on a roll now. This is looking good.
African-American turnout exceeded all expectations in Florida. African-Americans represent 11% of the population, yet on Tuesday, November 7th, represented 18% of the voting electorate.
You know, there were some precincts in Jacksonville where turnout was 70%.
Well, throughout the course of the day, the exit poll numbers showed it very even. Either we were up a point, dead even.
Early that morning, I was on radio, WTMP, Stacey Powers' show, and people started calling in saying, you know, we're standing in lines, the place is not open.
We'd started getting calls from people who were complaining they had had a hard time voting, that the ballot was confusing.
George Bush was number 2, Pat Buchanan number 3, Al Gore number 4. But the way it looked on the paper, you saw George Bush and you say, under no circumstances, and then you saw Al Gore and you say, yes. But actually, that was number 3 on the butterfly ballot.
There was a woman who spoke at a town hall meeting many weeks later who was a Holocaust survivor, who I think summed it up pretty well. She was scared to death that she'd voted, you know, for an anti-Semite.
For the first time, Jim Crow came back on the scene.
There were thousands of Floridian voters, mostly, no shock to you, I'm sure, African-American, who Katherine Harris's firm had, that she had hired, had purged from the voting rolls.
Where over 8,000 people were classified as felons.
As it turns out, they weren't felons. She's actually admitted that this little mistake was made. Oh, by the way, the firm was from Texas.
Well, Jeb Crow Bush and Catherine Crow Harris designed ballots that people couldn't understand, long voting lines, malfunctioning voting machines, all types of games went on Tuesday, November 7th.
The networks put Florida back in the undecided column. This was probably, it was well after midnight Eastern time, probably close to 1 in the morning.
The networks who had reversed their position on Florida then started to call the election for Bush.
They said the lead's 50,000 votes in Florida, and they called it for Bush.
And then called the election for Bush.
They had the graphics all ready to go, the profile, the waving flag. It all looked so official.
You cannot underestimate the power of network television.
Somebody was standing there with a remote control.
Flick the channel, George Bush is the next president of the United States. Flick the channel, George Bush is the next president of the United States.
You had Dan Rather,
CNN,
Tom Brokaw,
CBS, and
Peter Jennings.
ABC and NBC.
We've all grown up with television. I mean, these people were saying this is the next president of the United States. We believed it.
We fell silent. We probably had about 90 seconds of silence because we thought we were in the game.
It was decided that there would need to be a concession.
I remember the vice president very clearly saying, I need to talk to the governor myself.
He went upstairs to call George Bush, and I sent an email to the staff back in the headquarters, never surrender. It's not over yet.
I said, get me Nick Baldick on the phone. We got Nick on the line. We said, what are the numbers? And Nick Baldick said, the networks are wrong. The numbers we're seeing, this thing is going to be 1,000 votes either way.
I was in the room with the vice president when he made the first call to Bush.
Gore simply said, well, they can't say we didn't give him an exciting election. And he said, you know, take care. And he hung up the phone. And I think he sort of sighed. And then he said, you know, let's go.
Then they show the limo, the motorcade, start driving towards War Memorial, I think it was, in Nashville. And we're on the phone with Nashville saying, what the hell's going on? Where's he going? This thing's too close. He can't concede.
The Secret Service agent in my car turned to me and started offering his condolences to me. I remember thinking that I really didn't want to deal with that right now, so I just sort of stared out the window at the rain.
Reporters are the chattiest people you will ever put in a motorcade van, and it was deadly quiet.
total silence.
I started to pray.
Everybody's, you know, pretty devastated.
Nobody was talking in our van.
Not one word was spoken by anyone in the vehicle.
Like a funeral procession?
Yeah, you got it, pal.
We got a couple more calls from Nashville. And we said, look, you know, we're sticking by our earlier prediction. This thing is coming down to a razor-thin margin.
At that point, I placed a couple of calls to try to get a hold of a couple of the senior staff people. Couldn't get through to anybody.
And about 3 or 4 blocks before we got to the War Memorial, my pager went off. It was a call holding at the White House switchboard from Michael Hooley.
There was always one surefire way to get through to White House aides, and it's through the White House signal operator. It's a military operation that pages people.
We obviously got finally through White House signal to Michael Feldman, who was traveling in the motorcade about to enter into the War Memorial.
The White House operator connected the two of us,
I asked him, "Where are you guys?"
and I said, we're pulling up to the War Memorial.
I asked why. He said, "Well, we're about to concede.
He said, this thing is 6,000 votes.
This is an automatic recount." He said, "Well, we lost the election." I said, "We haven't lost the election. In fact, we may win the election."
As we were coming to a stop, Michael was on the cell phone telling me.
He said, "You can't concede. You can't go out on stage."
Gore's head right now is, let's get it over with.
He was walking faster than usual. I had to sort of fight through this crowd of, this sea of Secret Service agents and family members and other staff people who were at the War Memorial. He's about a quarter of the way down the hallway when I finally catch him. And I say to the Vice President, "Sir, we need to go to hold." And he looks at me and just gives me a grimace and says, "I'm not going to hold, I'm going to the stage." I pull up next to him again and tap him on the shoulder and said, "Sir, we have to go to hold." And he turned to me and he said, "I just talked to the governor. I told him I was going to go out and speak. He's waiting on me. I'm going to the stage." At this point, he's close to the stairs and he's still walking fast. And I ran out of options. And so what I did was I just got in front of him and I stood in front of the stairs, facing him. And I said, "Sir, we have to go to hold. It'll take 5 minutes. Everything will be fine."
The family was all pouring into this holding room.
While I was on the phone, we were getting updates, and it was dropping to 6,000 to 5,000.
Daley actually put his arm around the Vice President and about 3 or 4 feet from me and whispered that this thing was now 6,000 votes. And at that point, I had Michael on the phone.
By the time the Vice President walked in the room, it was down to 600 votes.
I just remember very vividly him saying, "Really?
Somebody said, "Well, what do we do now?"
There's no way he could go out and concede the election."
He had to call Bush back.
He got him on the phone and said, "Governor, things are not as we thought they were."
The governor on the other end explained that, well, my brother, the governor, says.
Gore said, "Well, I don't think your little brother has the final say in this."
Bush said something, probably not too agreeable.
And that's when he delivered the famous line, "Well, you don't have to get snippy about it."
Well, you don't have to get snippy about this.
And everybody in the room just broke up.
He hung up the phone.
And when he did, the whole room just burst into shouts.
High-fiving.
Screaming, basically.
Please, this race is simply too close to call. And until the results of Florida become official, our campaign continues.
Probably from the time we reached out to the time we got the Vice President into the hold, it was about 10 minutes.
About 10 minutes.
The fact that the networks called it for Bush that night and Vice President Gore called and conceded was a negative for the whole recount.
Because in the minds of the American people, he was the president-elect, and Al Gore was, a spoiler. I was proud that he fought. I was proud that he stood for principle of every vote must be counted.
We got the really big Supreme Court, Florida Supreme Court win where they said he had to start the recount. We all went out and, drank a bunch of champagne, and then the next day, the U.S. Supreme Court stopped the count.
If you go to when the Supreme Court shut us down, we were down by 154 votes.
Obviously, it was a 5-4 decision.
The election was decided 5-4.
In the Supreme Court.
We learned from this campaign that we must not only turn out people in record numbers, but we have to educate them.
The scoreboard broke, and that was my attitude, and that we had every right to take a shot at trying to get every vote counted and to see if we actually had won the thing.
Many folks in Florida, as well as folks around the country, felt that this election was stolen from them.
It was rigged.
We got screwed.